We are live right now. Hey everybody, how is it going? We're live again today with two very interesting guests. You know, obviously normally we talk more on the crypto side, but the other emerging and massive market is the cannabis space. So joining me today, I have Dr. Stuart Titus. He's considered one of the, old guard. I guess he was the guy, one of the first medical cannabis companies that actually went public in the U.S. And I also have Sonia Gomez with me, who is a very influential cannabis influencer who has also been in the industry for, I don't know how long, and has a very engaged fan base of cannabis enthusiasts, close to probably what? 1 million followers on your end, Sonia?
Right around.
Yeah, that rely on her for expertise. So I'm excited today because not only are we talking, we're talking about from an investment perspective, what I see as the two biggest markets. You know, crypto obviously has been one thing, but cannabis. So you put the two together, and we're going to talk maybe about we're going to talk a little, learn about cannabis, and even dive into how the markets are fusing together. So with that, Sonia, why don't maybe you give a quick intro of Dr. Stuart, because you know him and you know a little bit about that, and then we'll let Doctor just kind of talk a little bit about himself.
First publicly traded company. All right. Well, that sounds good. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in with us. We would love to know where you're tuning in from, what city, what state are you in, and what are your burning questions. This is a rare opportunity to speak to such an incredible authority in the space, both on the crypto and on the cannabis side. And this is an honor truly for me to be able to speak with you. I've been watching and following the development of your company since I first stepped into the quote unquote entrepreneurial role and kind of pioneering the developing legislation with cannabis in Colorado in 2009, 10, and 11. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, this is the one and only Dr. Stuart Titus. He is the founder of Medical Marijuana Inc., which is a company of firsts, the firsts of which are addressing the United Nations about cannabis and CBD. Also, one of the first publicly traded companies, and really interfacing with the highest levels of government about the developing industry. So I would love for you to welcome him here, because we are also going to be talking about bridging the gap and solving one of the biggest challenges that the emerging cannabis industry is facing, which is the cash challenge. We are not allowed, just to give you some background, we are not allowed to operate like normal companies. We have to do everything in cash, which makes running a cannabis company a logistical nightmare, a huge security risk, and in more ways than one, a source of stress that is not only unreasonable but unnecessary. So when we talk about incorporating cryptocurrency and the blockchain as the solution for that major challenge, it globalizes the opportunity for everyone to be involved. And that's one of the things that I'm most excited to hear about today from Dr. Titus. So do you prefer Dr. Titus or Stuart? Which one is your best? I don't want to be informal, but I already feel like we're going to be friends.
Well, for sure, Sonia, it's a great pleasure to be on, and Stuart is just fine. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Well, welcome to the interview. Thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today. And why don't you, from the horse's mouth, as I said, I was so excited to hear, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing and your journey to get to where you are right now?
Well, it's been a fabulous journey. I've been so impressed with the cannabis industry and the potential therapeutic benefit of these cannabinoids. Really, it was something that I had a nice career as a physiotherapist and worked in clinical setting for many years with patients, pain management, injury rehab, etc. And I was doing a very high level of therapy, to the point that many professional sport and Olympic athletes in the off-season would come through to my office. And I was amazed, almost to a person, these professional athletes were utilizing cannabis in one form or another to help control inflammation, help with pain, help with sleep issues, etc. And of course, they had access to all kind of pharmaceutical medications, pills, et cetera, but they still preferred to try to break the law, so to speak, and get access to this natural botanical product because it was helping them with so many issues, in doing so without the necessary, the unfortunate unwanted side effects that many pharmaceutical medications confer to patients. So I saw so many of these patients coming through that I said, my gosh, there's got to be some science to this. I started to search the globe and found there were a few medical cannabis symposiums that actually potentially show that there was some medical benefit. And when I did my first symposium, I was blown away. I couldn't believe the amount of study and research on these cannabinoids, the extracts from the cannabis plant family, and the world medical community were actually studying these for potential therapeutic value, that there were pharmaceutical companies looking at some of the potential benefits, and more importantly, that the U.S. government actually had a patent going back to the year 2003 on the therapeutic use of these cannabinoids. And it's just such a conundrum because our law enforcement side of the government still thinks it's a Schedule I federally controlled substance with no medicinal use. But on the research side of the government, nothing could be further from the truth. There's tremendous research and certainly great therapeutic value for these cannabinoids, particularly non-psychoactive cannabinoids that don't confer the toxicity or unwanted side effects.
Wow.
I know.
Well, my history and journey, obviously a public company started in California in March of 2009, and I became involved just as an investor because I thought this might be the next great growth industry in America. And certainly coming from the East Coast out to California and seeing, legal cannabis for medical use, the tremendous amount of dispensaries, the free access that patients had to cannabis, and how many were using this therapeutically, I was even more impressed. And thus, when our company changed gears in March of 2011, more towards a hemp and CBD company, I really jumped in more full time with this. And currently today, I'm the president and CEO of the company. We're certainly excited about doing some great things around the globe. We've got great operations throughout the world, Europe and Latin America now, and certainly many of these countries in other parts of the world accept the natural botanical remedy, just as they would a full-on pharmaceutical medication. And this is certainly very exciting for the world. Here in the U.S., a full pharmaceutical medication has been very standardized and made from very synthetic sources just to be able to standardize it. But certainly the cannabis plant has so many interesting therapeutic compounds. All your cannabinoids, which now there are 146 different identified cannabinoids, your terpenoids, your flavonoids, your other plant materials, all acting synergistically. So many patients utilizing cannabis for medicinal use are getting about 500 therapeutic compounds all at one time. And I think this is partly why they're doing so well with many of their conditions. I mean, we're seeing, the cannabis-friendly states here, the Medicare Part D, your prescription drug coverage is about 30% lower. The use of opioids is significantly 25 to 30% lower as well. And the incidence of opioid overdose death being significantly lower as well. And certainly cannabis is playing a big part, and we really think the future of chronic pain management is a very high-dose cannabinoid, low-dose opioid combination.
Wow. Well, that's actually an interesting question, right? Because traditionally, and I guess I'm more of a newbie when it comes to specifics of the niche, right? Compared to both, you obviously who know a lot, Dr. Stuart and Sonia, right? So as the outsider looking in, when I think of, cannabis or marijuana, the first thing that comes to mind is a war on drugs. Then you think it's a bunch of, rebellious people that are just, doing things. You've got maybe hippies or whatever who are just trying to have a good time. And everything you're saying, I mean, you're talking, there's actual real scientific research, that goes into this stuff. You're talking, technological or scientific breakthroughs of, new, I can't even think of the word, new things going on. And you're talking about a solution to the actual opioid epidemic, which is an actual real problem that's being faced in the country today, right? Because, most people on the painkiller medicate, on the pain side, you get some opioid And before you know it, you're now addicted, and we now have a whole, country of drug addicts and everything on that front.
Right, and many of these people, of course, start very innocently because they have pain or they've had a surgery or something. The doctor has recommended opioids to them, but all of a sudden, people start to take the opioids, feel pretty good, find it has an addictive type of capability to it, and all of a sudden they can't live without them, and it really becomes a significant problem. So here we find significant potential benefit, but beyond the opioids, certainly for families with children with these unfortunate epileptic seizure disorders, that we see some very significant benefit here with this particular indication. And certainly this is a very humanitarian situation. No one likes to see a child suffering. And my gosh, if we can help alleviate some of this in a very natural, botanical way where there aren't any really downside or any harmful negative side effects, we're certainly thrilled to be able to bring these products to these individuals around the globe and hopefully be able to make them much more available as time goes along.
Definitely. So now let's talk about kind of what it is that you guys are doing and, what is it specifically that you're offering? Because, cannabis itself still kind of fits into a bit of a gray line, right? There are some states where it's legal, some states where it's maybe illegal, there's all that sort of stuff. Now, in your case, you guys are doing hemp and CBD, and, maybe if you could illustrate that or explain that so, someone who doesn't understand how it works could, get some information, right?
Well, certainly there's a lot more disinformation than there is information. It's very difficult for people to get the right information, et cetera. So hopefully we can set the record a little bit straight. From federal court ruling going back to the year 2004, hemp food products are fully legal throughout the U.S. So your hemp seed oil, hemp protein powder can be found throughout the U.S. in any health food store. And this is quite a nice business. About $600 billion a year goes into the hemp food industry. And we're certainly excited about this. And our products tend to fit into this category, even though the parent plant still might be considered the parent plant would be cannabis. You'd have two offspring. One would be hemp. The other side would be marijuana. And, of course, marijuana is now legal in 30 U.S. states for medicinal use. There are 9 U.S. states that actually approved it for recreational use. But certainly this cannabis plant, really since the beginning of recorded time, has been used medicinally. 8,000 years BC in ancient Chinese manuscripts. There are all kind of records about cannabis preparations, oils, tinctures, etc., being used medicinally. 6,000 BC in ancient Egypt and their ancient manuscripts also using cannabis. And right up until the 1940s, cannabis was part of the U.S. pharmacopoeia. In fact, every pharmaceutical company back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, all had natural botanical cannabis-based preparations. And it's interesting when you go over to Amsterdam, some of the cannabis museums, to see these live samples and bottles from companies such as Eli Lilly and Park Davis. So interesting to see this history. So really throughout recorded time and throughout history, cannabis has been used as a medicine for far longer than it has not. And certainly we're excited about the return of cannabis as a traditional medical preparation. Now, if you look in the human body, we all have this tremendous endogenous internal cannabinoid system with receptor sites widely expressed throughout our bodies for these cannabinoids. In your brain and the spinal column, you have your CB1 receptors. In the gut, the viscera, the internal organs, you have CB2 receptors. And there are many other receptor sites expressed throughout the body that do accept these cannabinoids. So certainly looking at this, you would think, when you look at this amazing receptor network within the body, that yes, cannabis-based medicine could actually potentially improve our.
Hold on, Dr. Stewart, I think we just lost your audio. Sonia, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can't hear him, though.
Oh, okay. Oh, I feel awful. He's talking. He might not be able to hear us either.
Oh, he's going for it, too.
Hold
on. We can't hear you.
I think we just lost your audio.
Lost your audio. We're like,
Yeah.
the,
You still there? Uh-oh. Man, I feel awful because he was going on, and
yeah,
I just want to hear everything.
he was killing it right now. I was ready. I was over here. If I had pom-poms, they would have been going.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, he's getting into, like, scientific, and I'm just like, this is awesome. I want to know more. And all of a sudden, I'm just like, oh, no, come back.
And then it goes blank. Cuts to commercial. No!
Wait, did we hear him again? Oh, wait, no. Hold on. He's muted. Let me unmute him. You're muted. Okay, now we can hear you again.
On accident. We can hear you now.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
No,
No
that's
worries.
okay. You were.
Yeah, no, it's awful. I mean, well,
we were like celebrating everything you were saying, and we were like, no! It's like
Yeah.
when your favorite show ends too early.
Audio brought to you by Tylenol.
Yeah.
well, yeah, that's the joke, right? You know, what was, Jeff Sessions has come in and turned us off, right? Or
Yeah.
Who knows? So, so going on, I mean, I guess the quick summary is there are aspects of the human body that have only been understood in the last, call it 30 years with research about, what it's called, the cannabinoid, or it's the cannabis receptor, or there's something.
The endocannabinoid system.
Okay, a very big word that I can't pronounce. So the
cannabinoid system.
Yes. The endocannabinoid system has been discovered, and my understanding is this is like a relatively recent discovery, say in the last 30 years. And that is kind of the glue that holds how cells function together, right? So all that's come together, and cannabis is the natural plant that produces the appropriate, what would it be called, chemical? It's not chemicals, it's like the CB1 and the CB2 and terpenes and all that actually will affect it in a very beneficial manner. Is that a fair, I know it's not a great summary because I'm, you guys are obviously
well, that's the elementary school version of it. I would say that's a fair, like, beginner's basic understanding of what's happening. And it's now proven that this natural plant that is growing like a weed, quite literally, it develops the proper, or contains the proper nutrition for what is naturally occurring in our bodies. And right. So when we nourish the endocannabinoid system, we're actually serving two of the most major things in our body that regulate our health and well-being. Number one being hormones, and number two is the immune system. Because of where the CB1 and CB2 receptors are, 80%, they say that your gut is your second brain. 80% of your immune system is located in your digestive system or in your guts. And while you're using CBD or cannabis, the cannabinoids are directly nourishing the endocannabinoid system, which is promoting a healthier ecosystem inside of your body naturally. That's before we start talking about the cerebral benefits of stress relief, anti-inflammatory benefit, all these other things that we are starting to hear and are becoming buzzwords. CBD has kind of taken center stage as the body's most natural remedy and non-psychoactive form of cannabis.
Wow. Okay. So with all this, then it's my understanding that companies like Dr. Stewart's companies, because you want to, I guess, segment or target certain aspects of, usage or everything, you have then engineered the plant in some way so that maybe someone just needs stress release, or somebody needs pain relief, or somebody needs, a subset and doesn't need the entire feature set. And that's kind of how you guys put your products together. Is that a fair understanding, Dr. Stewart?
Yes, we're certainly excited about our products and the fact that they have been able to help so many patients with a variety of different conditions. Now, recent research has showed that people who start with CBD are generally on about 2.8 pharmaceutical pills per day, and after being on CBD, they're on about 0.7. So many times CBD is helping to address some issues.
Your audio went out again, honey. I think you're covering up your microphone in one way or another.
I'm sorry. Let me see if this is any better.
Yeah, now you're back.
That's better. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Sorry about that. So yes, it's very interesting to see this trend. And I believe Forbes magazine, Deborah Brochard wrote about a year ago that patients who, about half the patients, 50% of the patients who are using CBD are now fully off all their prescription medications.
Wow.
Again,
well, that's
a tremendous receptor network throughout the body. Definitely, we believe there's tremendous health and wellness benefits. And just like vitamin C, which was discovered, it took about 50 years before it was fully accepted by medical science. Here, we're on hopefully a similar path, maybe a little bit faster track, but we do believe at some point there will be a recommended daily allowance, again, because this helps support the very large self-regulatory system, the endogenous cannabinoid system.
Wow. So this is almost, wow, that's an interesting analogy, vitamin C. So
be a daily supplement.
Yeah, wow. Now to segue over, on the cryptocurrency and the blockchain side, you've mentioned you've reinvented yourself in your career, Dr. Stuart, 3 or 4 times already, and you see some sort of parallels. Let's have that discussion because I think that's kind of interesting. Obviously there's the currency problem, but, currency is only one application of the blockchain. So I would love to get your initial opinions or thoughts on why blockchain or crypto is interesting to the cannabis space.
Well, certainly it's been a great thrill to see this emerging commodity, if you will, come forth. I started my career on Wall Street in April of 1979. Certainly had a nice 11-year career. We saw some very interesting innovations, all the great mergers and acquisitions of the 1980s, et cetera. And rarely have I seen something that has captured the attention of not only everyone here in the U.S., but also internationally. I mean, there's not a person in the globe who really doesn't understand cryptocurrencies these days. It's so interesting to see this effect happening. And the fact that, again, there's been such a meteoric rise in the volume, the trading volume, the activity, and certainly the price has shown some significant volatility over the weeks and years, but certainly this only adds further to the amazing credibility that this is developing. Obviously, every business has challenges doing merchant processing, accepting payments, etc. And here's a payment solution that's accepted globally, which many times is very difficult to, even if you're from the U.S., you travel internationally with your American Express, your Visa, MasterCard, and even though you've got pre-approval, many times they'll just shut the card down. Your cryptocurrency is never going to be shut down. As long as it's on your phone or on your wallet, so to speak, your e-wallet, you're always going to have access to your cash. You can always transact business. And I think this gives a lot of comfort to people who are involved with international transactions. And certainly our society, our global economy is becoming more and more international every day. And to be able to, kind of navigate the waters, and many times speaking a foreign language is very difficult, but everyone understands the language of cryptocurrency. It's internationally accepted.
Interesting. So that definitely is an application. Now, are you familiar with the concept of the distributed ledger and the blockchain and how that, the underlying technology behind, call it Bitcoin or Litecoin or crypto, Dr. Stuart?
Well, certainly there's interesting, computer analogs and algorithms that go on behind this, which I've found very interesting. For example, in Bitcoin, there's only going to be a fixed amount of coin ever issued. And it's going to obviously take many, many years to get to the point where you're going to be able to generate that many coins. So unlike the U.S. Currency or any foreign currency, if you will, where basically the printing press determines how much currency is in supply, you don't really have that effect. And I think that's been part of the intrigue and why people have been so interested in these cryptocurrencies, just because there's going to be a limit, a cap, a fixed amount only available. And certainly that allows them to better determine a value for what this stored value instrument really represents.
Interesting. So let me tell you, we've actually been looking at the cannabis space. It's funny. You're on the cannabis side looking at the crypto space, right? We're on the blockchain. So it's funny. In our world, the term crypto is what the world knows. But, when you actually get into the world, it's more about the blockchain, which is the underlying technology, which is this distributed ledger. Kind of like, in the cannabis space, everyone knows of this term weed, but when you really get into it, there's a lot more than just weed, right? There's everything you talked about. So what's really intriguing to us, and specifically is there's the application of currency, but crypto is just one application of what's called this underlying technology called the blockchain. And I personally believe crypto represents, maybe 2% or 3% of the entire market application of what the blockchain can be used for. Kind of like, in your case, the person that's, getting, enjoying themselves on a Saturday afternoon, that's a small portion of the actual, everything you can do with the plant and the industry, right? So what's been most intriguing that we've noticed, and I would love to get your feedback on this, is the cannabis industry is this widely, it's blowing up. And, there are good players. Your organization has a wonderful reputation. You guys, have very, sound processes, have lots of systems, you guys do things right. And then, with all Wild West entities, there are some, I don't want to say bad actors, but maybe people who kind of run a little fast and loose. And that's created an interesting application. And I would love to get your feedback on this, where what the blockchain is basically what's called an immutable ledger. So it's a distributed database where multiple people can come in and write to it. And the beauty of it is because it's distributed, once the information is on there, it cannot be changed, with the exception, there's some caveats. But generally speaking, once the information is placed on there, it can't be changed. And the application of currency works great, right? Because you have a fixed supply, you can't have someone just inflating currency or printing more on the back end. You got your 21 million Bitcoins. It is what it is. That's life. Now, on the cannabis side, what we've noticed is it's a little bit, and I'm not sure how much of a historian you are, but have you ever heard of Upton St. Clair or the book The Jungle? Are you familiar with that? I feel it's a little Upton St. Clairish right now, where, because of the market and because you've got, in some places a dearth of supply, some places supply is going up, but people are just kind of labeling things, based on what people will buy. Like, Blue Kush is the big thing, or this is the thing. We'll just switch the stickers back and forth. And in addition, as we've studied this, specifically when it comes to plant profiles, your THC levels, your terpene production and all that, not only is it genetic based, but it also varies based on growing conditions. Meaning if the plant as it was grown, there was a drought or there was pestilence, or you had, you put too much pesticides on it or whatever, your terpene content from batch A would be drastically different than batch B. So, we see a very interesting application specifically on the traceability angle. Because if you can imagine, if you have a, immutable database where multiple players can put information, so if you combine IoT and specifically on the growing side with an immutable ledger, we actually look at that and the cannabis space as something, completely revolutionary. I would love to kind of get your initial feedback, on that concept, because I suspect you might even run into some of those problems on the supply chain side of your business.
Well, we certainly do, and there's so many different grades and varieties of cannabis. Obviously, you've got your THC, and you mentioned all the different terpenes and different strains, et cetera. And of course, this has great application because as the market develops, cannabis is the world's largest cash crop. There will be a futures market at some point for various grades and deliverables. So maybe a 10% THC or a 20% THC or a 30% THC. And then combinations, THC, CBD, et cetera, et cetera. So all these will be graded and potentially traded on the Chicago Board of Trade. More specifically, in terms of the therapeutic aspects, now when you're going into clinical study and research, you need to have your cannabis crop grown and processed under good agricultural practices, and then your good manufacturing practices on top of that to develop a good, say, for example, a CBD-rich hemp oil. So these things are all necessary to go into a package that you would submit to the US FDA or other regulatory agency. Your full chain of custody process, how you went from the seed all the way to your finished product for therapeutic use. And so I can certainly see great benefit of the blockchain throughout this entire process, both for futures market application as well as for clinical and therapeutic use throughout U.S. and world markets.
Yeah, I guess my question to you, and I'm curious. So today in your supply chain, right? Because you mentioned you don't actually grow, you contract the growing out to third parties, right?
Yes.
So how do you know, right? So if let's say I'm a grower and I'm, and you're going to give me the spec saying I want, I don't know, this sort of, or how do you guys spec your growers? Do you tell them that you want this level of terpene content and this level of THC, or, what's your process in terms of supplier management?
Right. Well, we supply the farmers with seed that's been certified by the EU, the European Union. And from there, basically they grow the crop. Once the crop is then harvested, we will have the crop then tested for its cannabinoid content. And then, of course, we'll also test for any residual pesticides or other toxic residue from farming practices or things such as heavy metal, etc. Once it passes the initial test, we then go to the processing, and actually we'll start to process out take the, say, for example, CBD-rich hemp oil from the hemp crop. And again, once we have this hemp oil developed over in Europe, we'll then once again test for product in terms of cannabinoid content, toxins, heavy metals, etc. And then we'll ship this to the U.S. From here, we'll once again do our testing. So we triple lab test to make sure every step of the chain is compliant. And we fully delineate this entire chain of custody process, which then allows us to have more of what's considered maybe a pharmaceutical or at least a nutraceutical grade worth of product.
Now, when you test, are you testing every single bottle? Do you test them in batches? Can you actually test every single plant that goes through your system, or how does that process work for you guys?
Well, yes. So we do a batch test. We do obviously have batches, and we test these particular batches as they come in, and that's basically the process as it works.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so what we're thinking, and I'd love to get more feedback on this, is literally we believe that with a combination of IoT and the blockchain, you could capture every piece of data that goes through, hypothetically even eliminating the concept of batch testing. Not that batch testing, batch testing is kind of like the best of a bad world, right? Because it's not practical to test every plant, but literally you could package and test and verify every bottle, or, from every plant, every seed to the plant to everything, to go all the way through. So literally when a consumer buys a package, that QR code, they'd be able to hypothetically scan and see the entire history of the process, from start to finish on that front. And you're smiling. I don't know if that's a smile of, you think I'm crazy, or it's a smile of, is that a nirvana? I'd be curious to get your opinion on that.
Yeah, no, I think this is a fabulous technology that's, of course, developing over time. But yes, for the consumer to be able to fully delineate and see where exactly their medicine or their natural botanical remedy or just their nutritional supplement came from, I think is fabulous. And this is definitely going to make a significant benefit throughout the industry. Of course, trying to delineate this entire chain of custody process has always been a challenge, and certainly the solution that you're mentioning here, once it's fully developed, I think will answer a lot of the challenges that many of us in the industry today face.
Yeah, well, Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to weigh in here because I actually get to represent a lot of the consumers, and I can tell on both here we're having more of the business side of things and what the procedural aspects of getting the product to the customer's door and into their kitchen and finally down the gullet, right? And I actually get to interface with tens of thousands of patients almost every day. We have hundreds watching us now, actually, and I get to hear their direct feedback. So the challenge with the snake oil products that are out on the market right now, what's actually in the products, how is it being made, where is it being manufactured, how can I tell that this product is tested and trusted? And they depend on me, a human being who is investing her own time, her own money, her own energy into filtering through all of these different brands and glossy advertisements to select the best performing products on the market, and then connecting the consumer to those products at a reasonable rate. I think that this tracking for both the cannabis and the CBD side or hemp side of things, because hemp is not limited to both the CBD, it's taking center stage, but there are so many different benefits to the hemp plant. It just CBD happens to be the one that everyone's talking about right now. And, I think that the tracking and it will really simplify the process that the business owner is having to go through in order to remain compliant, but also will lift the veil, if you will, and create transparency for the consumers so that we can trust from the very beginning off this QR code or off of this barcode what we're putting into our bodies. And I mean, that is transferable across multiple markets. So think about what that could do for the food industry. I mean, how many questions do we have around what kind of food are we putting in our body? Is this a Monsanto tomato? Is it actually fish that I'm eating today? Like, these are the transparency that we're asking for as consumers. We don't have to believe our parents anymore that hot dogs are the leftovers of the animal that we, of the steak that we're eating or of the pig that we're eating, right? And the same thing happens with the cannabis and CBD industry. And we have such a unique opportunity at the beginning, developing stages of it. And I love that, you've been in this industry since 2010 and 11, but, now really focusing on the process of it all. We're getting into the nutraceutical side of the cannabis industry as well, and really wanting to do things right from the very beginning. How can we create and the question is inside in our internal team is, how can we create the most transparency so that consistency so that every time one of our consumers picks up a product, they know that it's going to deliver the same results. And that is the number one challenge, is consistency. No matter what procedures we go through, how do we create consistency in the product from the farm all the way to the kitchen is the thing that we're looking for. So that's huge. And the same thing happens with our money. We want consistency with our money, where we're putting our investments, where we're, how our retirement and our 401ks and all of the social security, like all of these traditional things are at risk right now. And we're looking to the future. How is this problem going to get solved? And we can't leave it to the broken system that we're all complaining about right now. We can't leave it to them to solve that issue for us. We have to take matters into our own hands. And Bitcoin is considered the pioneer of that. There's multiple currencies that are coming on board. But from what I'm understanding, as I'm starting to get more educated in this technology-based currencies, is the blockchain is actually what is allowing for that eco-independence for us individually and collectively as organizations. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, conceptually speaking, the concept of the blockchain is, in whom do you trust? Traditionally, what we have is, if you look at currency, we have some entity, be it the federal government, be it, whatever the entity is, and we trust them to take care of everything. Specifically, when it comes to product here, it's not regulated, but like in the, there's the organization called the FDA that, makes sure that, our drugs are safe for us and the food we eat is safe for us and everything on that front. Conceptually speaking, what a blockchain allows us to do is decentralize and, transfer power from a central authority, into the players and allow people to, participate. And then, the beauty of this is you've got this immutable ledger where, the data can't be changed once it's on there. So if the data is there, we trust that the data is, the term is trustless, but it doesn't really, I think, capture the right term. But by meaning trustless, it's that, we don't need to hope that, Sonia did it right or Dr. Stewart's a smart person or anything like that. It's there, and we can look at that and say, okay, well, this plant has this THC value or has this CBD concentration because of all these things that happened. And people would ideally be able to look at that and go from there.
I have to ask this question because I'm dying. I need to know. Okay, and I know my consumers really want to know this too, because I think that in Middle Earth, if you will, if we're talking about this in kind of like, where's the center ground? I think we in our mentality, in our exposure, and also the risk that we're willing to take on these new technologies, on these new financial waves or these new waves of medicine. These are all uncharted territory. Cannabis, CBD, cryptocurrency, blockchains, these are all like, eventually going to make it into the Webster's dictionary, right? But it is not quite there yet. And I love that Dr. Stewart actually said that this is something that the whole world can understand. Cryptocurrency is a language or a concept or idea or currency that everyone in the world across the board can understand. And I'll have to second that. My 9-year-old daughter is overhearing my husband and I about investment strategies and how we're choosing to take a portion of our savings and investing it into cryptocurrencies. And she's like, hold on a second, watching us looking at our phones while we're watching our points like the stock market, while we're watching our investment appreciate, go up and down here. And it's like this heartbeat sort of thing that's happening here. And my daughter's like, what? You invest $1,000 and now there's $10,000? Wait a minute, yesterday we had $10,000 and now there's only $8? What happened? And she's like watching this whole thing happening, and I'm thinking to myself, like, pretty soon this kid isn't even gonna know that it was Benjamin Franklin on the $100 bill. Like, I have also a 13-month-old, like that kid isn't gonna know anything about cash. Things are moving so fast that even our next generation is getting involved. So the challenge then becomes, and here's my question, the challenge then becomes, how do we bridge the gap between our left and right side of our brain, the side of ourselves that knows and wants cannabis to be legal because we're personally experiencing or personally witnessing the transformations that are taking place, whether it's the scared mother who finally can have a night's rest because her daughter who was having 200 seizures is now not having any, to the grandmother who hasn't heard about or wanted anything to do with cannabis since it was introduced in the 60s in what they called square groupers, being dropped out of the planes in Florida as part of the drug trade. Now we're seeing that same grandmother picking up a bottle of CBD to manage her rheumatoid arthritis so that she can remain independent. The same conversation and the same challenges are happening for the consumer with cryptocurrency. And my question is, how do we as an organization connect the dots for the consumer? What's the benefit for the consumer to understand and utilize cryptocurrency besides the fact that it allows them freedom and a way to anonymously purchase and possess things like cannabis, which is not legal to transfer or purchase across state lines? And also, what is the benefit for the business owner in using cryptocurrency as a method of purchasing or exchange with the consumer? Can you guys speak to that?
I'll let Dr. Stewart take a first crack at that.
Well, certainly glad to do so. And certainly maybe I'll start with the second question first about the business owner. Certainly the ability for them to take cryptocurrency, I think over time is only going to add value to their business, because as time goes along, you'll have more and more restaurants and hotels, et cetera, accepting cryptocurrency. And if you don't accept cryptocurrency, you're going to be left behind, so to speak. In another kind of a left behind concept, we find so many people and individuals in our society who've been kind of left behind by our medical society. Of course, we're still operating in a 1940s paradigm, if you will. This endogenous cannabinoid system, maybe the most profound discovery in the entire history of medicine, the late 1980s when it was discovered, is still hardly even mentioned in any medical schools, much less having anything taught about it. And we really believe, as some of the more advanced people in terms of medical cannabis believe, that more lives will be saved by the manipulation of this endogenous cannabinoid system than all the sterile surgical techniques ever developed. But given this, of course, today we find, even though we have the best healthcare in the world, we still have many people who fail our healthcare system. They still have pain. They're still suffering with disease, not feeling good in their bodies, and looking for some type of benefit, some type of relief. And all of a sudden, when the pharmaceutical meds don't meet the expectations of the consumers, they're going to go outside the box, if you will, and start to look at some of these alternative therapies and remedies. And we certainly have seen this with many people who now come to use our CBD products for, of course, families with children with epilepsy. We see this with autism families, etc. And not only are these children overcoming their epileptic seizure challenges, but also many of these children are developmentally challenged. And now all of a sudden, once they're on CBD, they overcome these developmental challenges. They're more social, they're more cognizant, they're more interaction with family members, etc. And this is something that certainly leads to significantly much more clinical study and research to find out exactly how and why these amazing compounds are doing what exactly that it is that they are in fact doing.
Wow, that was pretty good. I guess my answer to you, Sonia, is I'm going to say I'm a tech guy, and generally speaking, there's a term we use called technobabble. So I've been beeping and clicking, and I'm going to rely on someone like you who's much smarter than me and better at relating with people to translate or communicate these, very deep concepts into something that, the world and the market can't understand. So I guess I'm passing the buck on this one.
Well, I think Dr. Stewart nailed it really well. I think cannabis has developed, and CBD alike, has developed a reputation for being the great equalizer. And it's really important as we're progressing forward in this industry and the way that we're serving our consumer, not only with products, but where we focus is on the education side of things. And as I'm watching the comments come through, there is a disconnect in what we know and what we utilize and what is actually being transferred to the consumer. And I love you guys so much. I'm actually advocating for you in this whole process, because I want you to understand what the wave of the future is. And I'll speak directly to them because they're here with us and they're telling us what they want to know, what they need to know in order to not only feel included, but empowered by the truth. And the truth is, the world is moving faster than we can often keep up with. And these new waves of information, these new waves of technology, these new waves of medicinal availability, medical availability, is becoming more and more powerful. And if it is something that you are interested in understanding for yourself, for your family, and for your future, you have to start to understand and dive into these deeper conversations around, tech-based currencies, around plant medicines like cannabis and hemp CBD, and what are the regulations and how can you benefit from the development of these industries? How can you stay not only involved, ahead so that you generationally are setting your family up for success. And I have to really, pay heed to the 1940s mentality of medicine. It's no longer serving us, right? And the same thing is happening with our money. It's that system, that old way of thinking is no longer serving us, which is why people like you, Dr. Stuart, are so instrumental and so important to the progress, because somebody who looks and sounds and acts like them, who has served them on Wall Street, which is their favorite place to hang out, right? You can go in and now infiltrate the highest levels of government with the most important and innovative thoughts and actionable steps, and giving them a way to participate on behalf of the consumer, on behalf of the American people. So for that, I am super grateful. I love how you articulate our message. I love how you represent this in such a easy to absorb way. It's not foreign. What you're speaking is plain English, and it doesn't always feel that way when we're watching the news, if you will.
Great. Well, we've been on for a bit, so I want to thank everyone for tuning in and bearing with the technical difficulties. Dr. Stewart, if you and Sonia can stand for a second after I go off, that'd be great. But yeah, so everyone out there, thank you for listening, and we will see you guys shortly. Thanks a lot.
Dr. Stewart. That was so nice to meet you.
Great to meet you. Thank you so very much for the